Here's the problem that happens when you're speaking in a second language and you're trying to do it in a natural accent. The problem is that if you just slip up on one letter, one single sound, that can then cause everything to fall apart from a natural sounding perspective. And today we're going to be taking a look at, in American English, what is one of these letters that can be causing that problem, because what you're going to find it does is that as soon as you say it, you can end up blocking a lot of breath. You can end up raising your placement. You can end up putting your tongue in your mouth in a position that's going to be less natural for other sounds. And then everything, again, just becomes much more challenging. We're going to be talking about that letter today in this episode of the Schwa Mill. Good morning, guys. Good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to the Schwa Mill, which is your American English pronunciation review show. We have a free group on Telegram where people can send us audio files for review. And then what we do is I pick one and then we go in on it. We talk about it. What are the things that are happening there, with the hopes that you can listen to it and apply what we talk about to your own speech. And to guide you in this process, there is me. What's up, guys? My name is Jeff. It rhymes with breath. That is one of the 4 keys to a natural sound in American English, including placement, pitch, breath, trying to weaken your consonant sounds in order to strengthen your vowel sounds. I also want to talk about a new program that we have going on. We'll do that towards the end, but let's take a listen to our audio file today to see what exactly is happening.
I think it's possible to say things in a way that if you gave it to a native speaker to listen to.
I'm play it one more time.
I think it's possible to say things in a way that if you gave it to a native speaker to listen to.
Okay, so just some quick notes before we get to our central focus. We talk a lot on this channel about sounding flat. We talk a lot about pitch. This would be an audio file that really would benefit from, one, finding where the thought groups are. So where are those groups of words that we say? Where do they start and where do they end before they move to the next one? I would really encourage you to find where your thought groups are and make sure that whenever you go from one thought group to the next, you're changing. You're changing, especially pitch. It's not just pitch, it's all those elements of contrast. But you have to make some changes, because I will say that while this sounds very fluent, things are really connected. There's a lot of moments where breath is coming through pretty clearly. The one thing that I think is missing is that it's really flat from a pitch perspective. But not the central thing I want to focus on today. I want to focus on the letter L.
I think it's possible to say things in a way that if you gave it to a native speaker to listen to.
Okay. The letter L sound appears in at least 2 words here. And each time it appears, there's immediate friction being added to your speech. A lot of what I'm hearing is that, we're very able to produce a lot of breath for the most part of this, and we're very able to keep things flowing without a lot of friction, without a lot of blockage of that. And we're also generally keeping our placement a bit low until we get to the L sounds. And then as soon as we're saying these L sounds, what's happening is the placement's going up and we're blocking a lot of breath. Let's look at the first L sound.
I think it's possible to say things in a.
Notice that the word to had a much higher placement. You're like, I think that's a low placement. There's a lot of breath and things coming out through there.
I think it's possible.
I think it's even has a little bit of a pitch progression, right? You have that descending pitch. I think it's good. I like that movement. Then we get the word possible to.
I think it's possible to say things in a.
And as soon as we say possible, even the pa is okay. But as soon as we get to that bull, it starts closing off. Boo. And the other way you can tell that that's happening is listen to how he says to. Because I would say possible to or possible to. But how are we saying possible and to?
I think it's possible to say things.
Possible to say, possible to say. That to has a very short vowel sound. The placement is a lot higher, and you can feel there's a lot more friction and tension in this part of the mouth. It's like, I think it's right now we're here, possible to say, versus like, I think it's possible to say. Do you see that when I do it like that, I'm able to keep the placement at a more consistent spot? So the first place I'm hearing that is on that possible to. That L sound on possibles causing some issues there. It's also happening towards the end of this file.
I think it's possible to say things in a way that if you gave it to a native speaker to listen to.
here we almost get like this like rolled R almost on listen to. Possible to listen to. That's how I would say it. Possible to listen to. Listen again how he says listen at the end. And you notice that friction. And when I say friction, you can tell it's friction because, again, it almost has that rolled sound.
I think it's possible to say things in a way that if you gave it to a native speaker to listen
To listen to. Native speaker to listen to. Like, it's just, there's a lot of disruption there. So it's disrupting some of the fluency. So what do we do about it? And I'll be honest, in your own speech, it might not be the letter L. If you're watching this, it might be a letter like B, or it might be a letter like P, or it might be a letter like N. These are sounds that most likely also exist in your first language. And these are the most dangerous sounds because when we have a sound that our first language has and then we try to put it in our second language, there's a challenge there because our body wants to go back to how we pronounce things before. So we have to be really careful with this because if we do that, then obviously we're going to go back to pronunciation patterns that are more like our first language and less like the language that we're learning. And that's the great part of this too, is that if you're learning other languages besides English, you need to still think about this stuff because there's still sounds in whatever language you're studying that your first language has, and they are interfering with the language that you're studying. Okay, you have to be careful of this. A couple people hanging out with us. What's up to Tom and what's up to Robert? Thank you guys for being here. So, for L sounds, the biggest recommendation I have for the letter L is instead of using a traditional light L, in your first language, the way you probably are making an L sound is you're taking the tip of your tongue and you're pressing it up against either your top teeth or your alveolar ridge, and you're getting a sound like L, L. Although yours probably doesn't sound like that. It probably sounds like L, or like things like that. Pretty heavy. Like if you say like L 3 times in American English, it sounds like L, 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 L. You don't want like L, L, L. You hear how the vowel gets cut, the placement starts rising, and things like that. All the things that we're seeing happening in this audio file. Okay. So what do we do is if a normal L sound isn't the goal, what do we do instead? I really recommend a dark L sound. There's a couple different ways to make a dark L, but the most basic is having the tip of your tongue down against your bottom front tooth or even the bottom of your mouth. Okay. Don't care so much about this part of your body. Care more about here because the dark L, what it essentially is doing is it's turning the consonant sound into a vowel. So instead of getting like a L sound, we're going to get like a L. And you're going to be like, that doesn't even sound like an L at all. Well, good. We want something that sounds really different. So like possible. Possible doesn't sound like possible. Possible. That's a really high placement. It's blocking a lot of breath. It sounds like possible. Bull. Bull. See how it's almost like a vowel. Possible. Oh, oh, oh. If that's the L sound we're going for. Oh, oh, oh. Dark L's are very common at the ends of words, like in a word like possible or like trouble. You can also have them in the middle. It's like a word like wallet. Another place where you can put them, though, is actually at the very start. There's no reason you can't start a word with a dark L. So, for instance, when I say to listen to, that's with a light L. That's with my tongue on my top tooth, alveolar ridge. But I could use a dark L there, like to listen to, the possible to listen to. Okay, so that's with the dark L. So my tongue's actually down, and again, you can hear that L sound instead of that L. The dark L's, obviously, we talk about more on the channel and things like that as well. But this is going to help try to keep that placement lower. It's going to remove some of that friction with the L sound that I'm hearing, and it's going to also allow you to keep the breath flowing more consistently. So I would consider that for those sounds. A quick note, guys: if you're finding feedback like this helpful, then there is a new addition I'm adding to our program called the Fluent American Institute. The Fluent American Institute is their place to go to if you're trying to sound more natural in American English, but you don't know what to do. You feel a little bit lost, you feel a little bit stuck. You ask your friends for help, and they're like, I don't know, you sound fine. Or your friends tell you, something sounds weird, but I can't tell you what. I will tell you what it is. Okay. What we're doing in the Fluent American Institute is we are adding an additional coaching group. So originally, we already have a mastermind that meets on Tuesdays. We're adding another mastermind that's going to be focused on adding emotion to your speech. And it's going to be focused on using that emotion to sound more natural. Because let's be honest, the biggest difference between American English and your first language is your first language has an emotional context. You grew up with it with your family, with your friends, with people around you. With English, very likely, if you're watching this, you learned it in school or you learned it maybe watching TV. Okay, you didn't really learn it built off of relationships. And the problem with that is that you lose some of the emotional context. Okay, you have all this emotional weight attached to your first language. You don't have any of that with English. And if you don't have that, you're going to actually end up kind of sounding like our audio file from today. Like what's the emotion of this?
I think it's possible to say things in a way that if you gave it to a native speaker.
Like one of the biggest issues with this audio file, I would say, I mean, it's very clear. Like the breath is good. It's got a lot of fluency. It's not only flat from a pitch level, it's also flat emotionally. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel about this. It's very objective. It's like using English as a tool. And if you're just using English as a tool, it's going to be very hard to get a very natural sound. I want to help you avoid that. So I hope that new addition to the Institute is helpful. So again, both of our group coaching sessions in the Institute are meeting. One meets on Tuesdays, 8 to 8:30 a.m. New York. And then the deep dive, where we start adding some emotion to our language, that's going to meet on Wednesdays, right around at 9 to 9:30 a.m. New York. Okay, so if that sounds like something of interest, you actually want to start not only sounding more natural, but actually, in all honesty, if you do this, you're going to sound better than native speakers. Because even some native speakers struggle with this. I can tell you because I work with them. I would like to help you with that. Beyond that, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Oh, what's Ivan saying? Ivan's saying, you hit the nail on the head. I learned English from school. And the first time I met an American in Taiwan, I sounded clunky. Look, we're learning our second languages as tools, which is great. But it's going to be hard to sound really natural if you're just trying to use it as a tool. We have to start making it human. I will show you how to make it sound human. Thank you guys so much for your time. I will see you on Friday with the next edition of the Schwa Mill. Thanks for sending us audio files. Thanks for watching. There's a lot of pronunciation resources out there. So the fact you have spent some time here with me, it's appreciated. I'll see you guys later. Have a good day. Have a good night.